absolute power has always collided with one unstoppable force: the human body's refusal to live forever. For ancient rulers, the realization that their empires ended at the grave wasn't just personal, it was a failure of divine authority and statecraft itself. From Qin dynasty emperors to Renaissance monarchs, staggering portions of national wealth were poured into defeating death, with civilizations like ancient Egypt diverting nearly 40% of their entire economy into the afterlife industry. Alchemists, physicians, and spiritual specialists operated under lethal pressure, crafting elixirs, rituals, and experiments where failure often meant execution. This is a deep dive into the top 10 most shocking ways ancient rulers tried to achieve immortality, where chemistry, belief, and madness collided with fatal consequences. At number 1, we begin with the Mercury Empire and the chilling alchemical fatalism of Qin Shi Huang, whose reign from 221 to 210 BCE stands as history's most extreme collision of absolute authority and obsessive fear of death. As the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang survived repeated assassination attempts, and those near misses ignited a decade-long crusade against mortality itself. Convinced that immortality was chemically attainable, he mobilized thousands of scholars, magicians, and alchemists to search the known world for the mythical elixir of life, grounding his belief in the idea that mercury, liquid, elusive, and unnaturally fluid at room temperature, embodied eternity. Every single day, the emperor consumed carefully refined pills of immortality infused with mercury, believing the metal's properties would unbind him from the limits of flesh and time. This was not an isolated obsession, but a massive imperial operation, most famously symbolized by the expedition led by the alchemist Xu Fu, who sailed with 3,000 virgins and hundreds of craftsmen in search of Mount Penglai, the legendary home of the Tree of Deathlessness. As the years passed, Qin Shi Huang's world became one of paranoia and poison. He constructed elevated walled walkways, concealed every window with curtains, and decreed death for anyone who revealed his location. When alchemists failed and fled, his rage culminated in the infamous burning of books and burying of scholars, where 460 learned men were reportedly buried alive. Ironically, the mercury meant to preserve his life accelerated his decline, eroding both mind and body. He died suddenly at just 49 years old in 210 BCE, a death now widely attributed to mercury poisoning, reinforced by modern forensic analysis and a 2010 discovery on the Tibetan plateau, describing his frantic search for immortality herbs in the Kunlun Mountains shortly before his end. Even in death, his obsession endured, sealed within a tomb rumored to contain a scale model of his empire, complete with rivers and seas of flowing liquid mercury, a final toxic monument to a ruler who tried to conquer death and was consumed by it. Kicking off at number 2 is Mithridatism, the pharmacological hardening of Mithridates VI Eupator, king of Pontus from 135 to 63 BCE, whose path toward immortality was not on alchemy, but on calculated biological adaptation. After witnessing his father's assassination by poison in 120 BCE, Mithridates fled into the wilderness for 7 years, where survival became a living laboratory. During this exile, he subjected himself to a relentless program of toxicological conditioning, ingesting gradually increasing sublethal doses of poisons to train his body into resistance, a practice later named Mithridatism. His ambition extended far beyond self-experimentation. He transformed Pontus into a hub of advanced medical and toxicological research, reportedly conducting controlled trials on condemned criminals to measure antidotes and toxins. From this research emerged the Mithridatium, a universal antidote he believed could shield him from assassination and render him effectively immortal in a political world defined by betrayal. The formula evolved into a complex polypharmaceutical blend of pungent plants, ginger-heavy mixtures, and later additions like viper flesh and skink. Mithridates' ability to speak 22 languages allowed him to absorb medical knowledge from across his domains, refining a recipe coveted for centuries. Yet this triumph became his ultimate curse. After defeat by Pompey and betrayal by his own son, Mithridates attempted suicide by poison to avoid Roman capture. The toxin killed his daughters instantly, but his own fortified physiology resisted it completely. Unable to die by chemical means, he was forced to ask a Gallic bodyguard to kill him with a sword, proving that he had mastered poison only to become imprisoned by his own invulnerability. The Mithridateum survived him, remaining a cornerstone of Western medicine until the 19th century, revered as a panacea against decay, disease, and death itself. Coming in at number 3 is Sokushin Butsu, the systematic self-mummification of the living Buddhas of northern Japan, one of the most harrowing spiritual quests for immortality ever recorded. Practiced by a small group of monks within the Shingon sect, Sokushin Butsu was not about extending life, but transcending decay through a state of deathless meditation. The ritual unfolded over nearly 3,000 days and relied on advanced understanding of toxicology, botany, and physiological decomposition. Monks began by eliminating all body fat through a punishing diet of nuts, seeds, and fruit, combined with relentless physical exertion, reducing the biological fuel needed for post-mortem rot. This transitioned into mokujiki, or eating a tree, where sustenance was limited to pine needles, bark, resins, and seeds, stripping away bodily fluids. The most extreme phase followed with the ingestion of urushi tea, brewed from the toxic sap of the lacquer tree, Toxicodendron vernicillifluum. This poison induced violent sweating and vomiting, acted as an internal preservative, and killed microbes and maggots that would normally consume the corpse. In the final act, the monk sealed himself alive inside a stone tomb, seated in lotus position, with only a narrow air tube and a bell. Each day, he rang the bell to signal life. When the sound stopped, the chamber was sealed for another 1,000 days. If the body resisted decay, the monk was declared a living Buddha and displayed in a temple as an immortal presence. Tetsumonkai, one of the rare successful cases, reportedly gouged out his own eye as an offering to the deities of Mount Yudano, and his preserved remains are still venerated today, a haunting testament to humanity's willingness to destroy the body in pursuit of eternal existence. Landing at number 4 is the King's Drops, a grotesque chapter of 17th century medicinal cannibalism driven by King Charles II of England, the so-called Merry Monarch, whose public charm masked a private obsession with alchemy and experimental chemistry. Inside a hidden laboratory at the Palace of Whitehall, Charles pursued what he described as good health and something like eternal life, immersing himself in esoteric theories borrowed from Paracelsian alchemy. Central to this fixation was an elixir known as the King's Drops, formulated according to the doctrine of similia similibus curentur, the belief that like cures like. The primary ingredient was not a rare herb or mineral, but 5 pounds of crushed human skull, illicitly sourced through networks of gravediggers, many operating in Ireland and paid to supply fresh remains. Following Paracelsus's teachings, the most prized skulls were those of men who had died violently in their prime, under the assumption that their vital spirit remained concentrated in the bone rather than dissipated through natural aging. The preparation itself was an elaborate ritual of mincing, distilling, and redistilling skull fragments with dried vipers, ivory, and hartshorn, transforming human remains into a consumable essence. Charles reportedly took these drops frequently, dissolving the powder into wine or chocolate to preserve vigor and clarity of mind. This fascination with corpse medicine was not unique to him. Queen Mary II shared similar interests, while King Francis I of France famously carried mummia on his person at all times. During Charles II's final illness in 1685, his doctors intensified the treatment to a horrifying degree, force-feeding him up to 40 drops per day as he lay incapacitated by a stroke. Modern historians believe this extreme dosage, combined with chronic mercury exposure from his laboratory experiments, likely hastened his death. The king's drops stand today as a chilling symbol of how absolute power allowed rulers to consume their subjects, quite literally, in the pursuit of longevity. At spot number 5 shines aurum potabile, the toxic golden promise that sustained and ultimately destroyed Diane de Poitiers, the legendary mistress of King Henry II of France. In the 16th century French court, Diane's seemingly ageless beauty provoked awe, envy, and whispers of sorcery, especially as she remained strikingly youthful well into her 60s. Her secret was not divine favor, but daily consumption of potable gold, an alchemical elixir composed of gold chloride and diethyl ether. Rooted in Renaissance alchemy, aurum potabile was believed to transfer the perfection and incorruptibility of gold, the most noble and non-reactive metal, into the human body, preventing wrinkles and preserving the alabaster complexion prized by the elite. This belief echoed ancient traditions stretching from pharaonic Egypt to 2nd century Chinese alchemist Wei Boyang, who described gold as an inherently immortal substance capable of granting longevity. Yet the reality beneath Diane's luminous image was far darker. Chronic gold intoxication suppresses white blood cell production and induces severe anemia, producing the deathly pale appearance that became her signature and was mistaken for youth. In 2009, forensic analysis of her hair revealed gold levels 500 times higher than the norm for her era, alongside traces of mercury introduced during the refining process. These toxins weakened her body relentlessly, thinning her hair and rendering her bones fragile despite her active lifestyle of riding and swimming. Diane de Poitiers died in 1666 at the age of 66, still praised for her composed features, but internally ravaged, her body transformed into a gilded prison by the very substance she believed would preserve her forever. Coming in at number 6 is the Blood Countess herself, Elizabeth Báthory, and the terrifying belief that youth could be stolen, a legend forged in late 16th century Hungary and still haunting cultural memory today. Born in 1560, Báthory belonged to one of the most powerful noble families in Europe, and her story represents the most extreme expression of the idea that vitality is a transferable force. Accused of murdering more than 600 young women, she allegedly believed that the blood of virgins contained a concentrated, youthful essence capable of tightening skin and halting physical decay when absorbed through the body. This belief stemmed from early proto-scientific ideas that associated strong blood with life itself and understood aging as a gradual depletion of that vital fluid. Witnesses claimed Báthory targeted peasant girls and later noble women, subjecting them to brutal tortures before bleeding them into tubs where she bathed in their warm blood. The historical truth of these rituals remains fiercely debated. While over 300 witnesses testified against her and mutilated bodies were reportedly discovered during her arrest in 1910, some scholars argue she was the victim of a calculated political conspiracy orchestrated by the Habsburgs and her own relatives, eager to seize her estates and erase enormous debts owed to her. Regardless of where the truth lies, the case exposes a deep-rooted fear that elites could exploit their power to drain vitality from the lower classes. Elizabeth Báthory was never formally tried, but was sealed alive in a windowless chamber of her castle, where she died in 1914. Her legacy endured, mutating into folklore and ultimately inspiring the modern vampire myth, a symbol of immortality achieved through bloodshed. Rolling in at number 7 is the mellified man, one of the most unsettling and sacrificial experiments in humanity's long war against decay, where the human body itself was transformed into medicine through honey. Documented in the 16th century Chinese pharmacological masterpiece Ben Sao Gangmu, this practice described elderly men in Arabia who willingly offered themselves for a process known as honey mummification as a final act of altruism. Nearing death, the donor would abandon all food except honey, consuming it exclusively while also bathing in it daily, until even their sweat and excrement were said to become honey-like. Inevitably, the body succumbed to malnutrition, after which it was sealed inside a stone coffin completely filled with honey and left untouched for a full century. Over time, the corpse dissolved into a preserved human confection believed to possess extraordinary healing properties. Known as a sovereign remedy, the mummified man was reputed to cure broken bones, internal injuries, and severe trauma, making it a treatment reserved for elites and religious authorities. The logic behind this ritual rested on honey's preservative chemistry, its low moisture and high acidity, creating an environment hostile to decay. Historical parallels reinforced its credibility, including accounts that Alexander the Great was embalmed in honey to prevent decomposition, a method also attributed to the Assyrians and ancient Egyptians. The mummified man represents a disturbing fusion of diet, alchemy, and martyrdom, where a human life was deliberately converted into a stable medicinal substance meant to resist time itself and restore others by consuming what remained. At number 8 stands Bigu, the alchemical starvation that claimed the life of Emperor Ai of Qin, a tragic example of Taoist transcendence pursued to fatal extremes. Ruling during the Eastern Qin dynasty from 361 to 365 CE, Emperor Ai became obsessed with escaping mortality and embraced a dual regimen of Bigu, or grain avoidance, combined with alchemical elixirs supplied by court fengshi. Bigu was rooted in the belief that grains nourished the san shi, or three corpses, parasitic spirits living inside the body that accelerated aging by reporting sins to heaven. By eliminating grains and surviving on wind, dew, and breath itself, practitioners believed they could starve these entities and transform into a Shen Ren, a divine being described as having skin like congealed snow and the power to ride dragons. Emperor Ai intensified this starvation practice with immortality pills likely containing mercury and lead, substances common in Taoist alchemy. According to the Book of Qin, the emperor became so severely poisoned that he lost awareness of his surroundings, forcing regents to govern in his place. He died at just 24 years old in 365 CE, and historians bitterly remarked that his elixirs fulfilled his wish by ensuring he would never grow old. His death exemplifies the lethal interaction between extreme fasting and heavy metal ingestion, a recurring and deadly pattern in Chinese history that later contributed to the deaths of at least 6 Tang Dynasty emperors who followed similar alchemical paths. Coming in at number 9 is mumia, the Renaissance obsession with consuming ancient royalty to steal their endurance, a practice that turned Egyptian tombs into pharmacies for Europe's elite. In the Renaissance, medical cannibalism became normalized among rulers and nobles who believed health and longevity could be absorbed by ingesting powdered human remains. The substance known as mumia originated from a linguistic misunderstanding, where the bitumen used in Egyptian embalming was confused with the preserved bodies themselves. This error fueled a massive trade in ground mummies, marketed as a universal remedy for ailments ranging from epilepsy to stomach ulcers. King François I of France famously carried a pouch of mumia mixed with rhubarb wherever he went, convinced it was essential for combating injury and aging. Apothecaries across Europe sold powdered corpses as medicine, driving an international market in ancient flesh. The psychological appeal to the elite was profound. They believed they were ingesting the perdurable essence of ancient kings, queens, and priestesses. In reality, many mummies were fabricated from the remains of the poor or recently deceased, but nobles preferred to imagine their powder came from pharaohs. The demand grew so intense that artificial mumia was produced by drying executed criminals in ovens and selling them as ancient relics. The irony was stark. Egyptian elites had preserved their bodies to ensure reunion with their souls, only for those bodies to be consumed centuries later by foreign rulers desperate for their own immortality. Closing the list at number 10 is the Water of Life, the haunting legend surrounding Alexander the Great and the River of Darkness, where myth, ambition, and tragic irony converge. Ancient sources like the Alexander Romance describe the conqueror's relentless search for a miraculous fountain capable of granting eternal life, a quest that led him to the edge of the world and into a mythical land of darkness. In one account, Alexander's guide, Hezer, accidentally discovered the Water of Life when salted fish fell into a pool and sprang back to life, prompting Hezer to bathe in the waters and achieve immortality. Alexander himself was barred from the spring by divine decree, denied the godhood he believed was his destiny. This longing, known as pathos, shaped his entire life, driving him beyond the limits of empire in pursuit of transcendence. When Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BCE at the age of 32, his body reportedly showed no signs of decay for 6 days, convincing many Greeks that he was divine. Modern medicine, however, offers a darker possibility. Dr. Catherine Hall has proposed that Alexander suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, an autoimmune disorder that causes paralysis while leaving the mind conscious. If true, Alexander may have been alive but unable to move or speak when declared dead, ultimately killed by the embalming process meant to preserve him forever. The ruler who chased the water of life may have been trapped inside his own body, witnessing his own apotheosis as he was prepared for a grave he spent his life trying to escape. The top 10 most shocking methods ancient rulers used to pursue immortality reveal a haunting mix of absolute power and deadly misunderstanding of science. From drinking liquid metals to mummifying themselves and consuming human remains, these leaders tried to defy the very laws of biology and paid the ultimate price. Their failures left behind poisoned tombs, gilded corpses, and alchemical discoveries that unexpectedly paved the way for modern chemistry and medicine. Ultimately, their quest for eternal life was a tragic testament to humanity's obsession with permanence. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's most extreme obsessions, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating content. Thanks for watching.